Welcome back to Branford Arts. This is a program in which we feature local artists. We feature the work that they create and also the different techniques that are used to create art. And today, I'm very happy to welcome my guest, Martha Link Walsh, who is a special kind of artist. She's listed as a paper cutting artist, but she's that and so much more, because it's not just what she does with the scissors, but it's how creative she is and the wonderful ideas that she comes up with in order to create these images that she puts to paper. So Martha, let's talk a little bit about how you got started with all of this. So I knew you back when you were a teacher at Walsh Intermediate School, right?
Yes.
And were you already cutting when you were?
I started cutting my first year of teaching when I taught in Delaware. And when I moved up to Branford, I opened up a space at Bittersweet Farm, which is no longer there. And there were only 3 of us at the farm. So I opened up the space to sell my parents' antiques, and there was no activity, so I needed something to do. So I had done paper cutting before, and I started doing paper cutting during the day to occupy myself. And then when I got the teaching job at the intermediate school, I kept the space at Bittersweet for afternoons and weekends and worked there. And then Bittersweet built up, and I continued doing the artwork afternoons and weekends until I quit teaching.
So how did you get interested in paper cutting? So tell us about the art of paper cutting.
Okay.
So I wrote down the German name for
The
it.
German word is Scherenschnitte, and there's a lot of people in the United States that know that because of the Pennsylvania Germans that came to Pennsylvania, and they brought the skill of paper cutting that is famous in Germany. But paper cutting really began in China when they invented paper. And it was initially used just by the calligraphers because it was very dear. But when paper making became easy, inexpensive, then they started cutting it for gifts, for decorations, for burning on funeral pyres, whatever, all over China. And then the skill and the paper spread on the trade routes to Europe. And there was a long tradition in Germany, in Switzerland, in Poland, in France, and their take on it was the silhouette. And in Israel, any Jewish community has a long tradition of paper cutting. And then settlers moved to the United States, and there's any large Polish communities still find paper cutters, and the Chinese, and everywhere. So it's all over.
And you developed an interest in it. It just kind of fascinated you, the idea of creating things with the scissors and a piece of paper?
My first year of teaching, I was sent home at Thanksgiving with mono and hepatitis. And I couldn't read or watch television because it had affected my eyesight. So all I did was bother my mother because you're not sick, you just can't do anything.
Right.
She came in with some scissors and paper and said, "Here, why don't you occupy yourself with this?" So it was through Christmas. I didn't get back to teaching until that March. So I cut out these really awful paper cuttings to give to people as gifts. And then when I quit teaching after 3 years, went to Europe, and I saw paper cutting over there. And that sparked the interest.
It was a revelation.
Yeah. So when I came back to the United States and had time on my hands, I started doing the cutting again. So it was a gift for me to be sick.
Yeah.
For sure.
Interesting.
For sure.
I was noticing recently on Antiques Roadshow where they had some silhouettes.
Yes.
And that's a form of, obviously, a form of paper cutting where they recreate an image. And the interesting thing about this particular set of silhouettes, and I don't remember who, and they identified the artist.
It may have been Edward.
Yes. And he cut them from life.
Yeah.
So he would have the figure stand in front of him in profile, and with a scissor and this paper, he would just cut it out, and you'd get
He
an image.
He didn't use the shadow machine that a lot of silhouettists do during that time. He would just sit and cut.
Yeah, it was amazing
And
to me.
his whole, partly what made him famous, there were silhouettes that people are used to that would be the bust, the head. But he felt that if you did the whole body, it showed the character of the person. So all of his paper cuttings are the entire body.
Yeah, these were full figures.
Yeah.
They were well-known figures, too. I can't remember who they were.
Oh,
but,
he did everybody. He
but
traveled
they
to the
were
United
well-known,
States.
yeah, well-known figures of the time.
Yes.
So he obviously had access to those people who wanted to
Yeah, he was
be
well-traveled.
immortalized,
Yes,
with
well-traveled.
a silhouette. So you started this, and you have, throughout your career, I mean, from my observation, you have evolved and you have sort of embraced different ways.
Having not gone to art school, it's all evolved. Any skill that I have is just over the years. And initially, I would just pick things to do, to cut. And then customers would come to Bittersweet, and they would come in and they'd say, would you cut my German Shepherd, or would you cut my Jaguar, or would you cut a Cardinal? And that taught me how to do a lot of the artwork by their requests. And then I'm still doing custom work 99% of the time. But now it's evolved into more than just one item. It's a collection of images that tell the story.
Like the one behind you.
Like the one I did for you, yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
here's one that Martha did. It was a lovely gift from my wife to me, actually my wife and my sons to me, when I retired from my job in New Haven. I worked in New Haven public schools for many years, and for 25 years I was president of the New Haven Teachers Union. So when I retired, my wife and my son spent some time with Martha. And the amazing thing about Martha is that what you do, because then I had a similar experience. I'll show you the one that I had Martha make for my wife in return. And you go and you talk to Martha about the things that you think represent the person, their interests or what they've done. And then based on the conversation, when you go back to see Martha, she has this wonderful, cutting or images to show you that eventually become part of the cutting. So the one behind me, if you can see it, it's got my name in the middle and the year that I started and ended my career, but all the things around it, the masks represent the fact that my wife and I love the theater, and there's a map of Italy, which is where my parents came from, and the little heart is the town in Italy where my parents came from, and the paper dolls represent my 6 sisters. I had 6 older sisters, and Martha represented that with this charming little cutout of figures. And the clocks represent the fact that I collect clocks. And the Christmas decorations, my wife and I always loved and enjoyed decorating our house at Christmas. We love music. We love to entertain at the table. Here's a picture of some garden stuff because I also am a gardener. A picture of running shoes. At the time, I was running. And so there are my running shoes. And here's a picture of the medical symbol because my son Frank is a medical doctor. And here's Angela's career as a math teacher with all the symbols of mathematics, the compass and the protractor and whatever. And my son Matthew is a paleontologist, so there's a dinosaur that represents his work. And there's the apple for teacher. So what Martha was able to do was, based on the conversation she had with my wife and my son, I think it was Matt who came in with her.
It was.
She created this wonderful collage of of images that represent everything that's important to me. My family, my interests, my work, the things that, you know, my wife and I used to do for pleasure and that were important to me. So I think that is such a gift for you to be able to do that for people, because in the end, you've given them something that is so important, because you can look at it and it's like everything, you know, that's important to me is on this frame. It so
tells your story.
Wonderful. It's your life story, you know, all collected in a frame.
Well, it's a treat for me to do the custom things, because I get to be part of the family in a way. And even with new babies, when grandparents come in and order a cutting for a new baby, I get to hear whether the room's decorated in turtles or whatever. And a lot of times we'll hear things in the story when they're talking to me that really is important that they wouldn't think to tell me. And then I can incorporate that into the cutting.
That's such a gift that you have to do that. And the other amazing thing is it's one continuous piece of paper, right?
It's all one piece of paper.
There's no break in the cutting. So Martha starts at one end and cuts everything out of one piece of paper, which is also amazing to me.
There have been, well, way too many times, and I want to count that I cut it apart and I have to start over again. But
yeah, but the end product is always one continuous cutting on one piece of paper.
Yes.
And again, that just boggles my mind.
Yeah.
That you can
Well,
do
that's the fun challenge of it too. The designing is the hard part. The cutting's the fun part.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful that you look at it that way. So show us some other examples of your work.
Well, let's see. These I just brought a couple samples of the baby cuttings. This is a simple one. Violets mean happiness. A lot of times, if there's not a story that goes with it, you can pick something that has specific meaning, and then that adds to what the image is. And this I had to bring. This was one of the first ones I did when I was sick, and it used to be mounted on a dark green background. That was before I knew anything about acid-free mat. So you can see what happens to it. But this was all one piece.
One of your earlier pieces?
Yeah, but it's a quarter fold, so it's not as detailed as it looks.
It looks pretty detailed.
I did a lot of the folded things because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know how to draw.
Right.
So I just cut. Now, you know, I'm fussier, so I do a lot of drawing first. And I brought a couple samples here. This is a Swiss cutting, and it's layers of colored paper, which is also what the Polish cuttings are.
Oh, look at how intricate that is.
And
but those are superimposed, right?
Right. It's like a collage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
with the layers of the paper.
But it's all cut paper.
But it's all cut. Yeah. And then this is an example of one of the old German ones. And the tradition in Germany was they used the cuttings, again, to tell a story, but it was more illustrative that they would use in book illustrations. So this is a story about a tradesman that's going and selling their work.
And again, look at how detailed
Incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
Incredibly detailed. And again, all one piece of paper. And this is done by a lady, Claudia Hoff, who really popularized cutting, a resurgence of it in this country. She was working at Landis Valley Farm Museum in Pennsylvania, and she found in their archives some old German cuttings. She had gone to art school, and she started getting interested in the cutting, but she wanted to paint them, so because she'd gone to art school. So she does the cutting, and then she paints it, and they're charming.
It is
just charming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of a certain era.
So that's fun. And then this guy, Ugo Moki, oh my goodness, his work, his are all one piece of paper and incredibly, he called them graphic sculptures because he got a sense of dimension with the flat cutting.
Yeah, because you do get, the figures are in front of
the
foliage.
He did amazing work, amazing work. And these are like stencils, but fabulous. And then, of course, Matisse.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you think about how he transitioned. I think partially it was because he was losing his vision. Right?
No, he was sick and he couldn't get out of bed.
Oh, okay.
And he had to design a stained glass window for a church. And so he had his assistant paint the paper the colors that he wanted the stained glass, and then he cut it out with these massive scissors, and then had the assistant glue them onto the wall so that he could see what it looked like. And that started him with doing the cutting, which he did the last 12 years of his life.
Yeah, I've seen.
Amazing.
Went to an exhibit a few years ago in New York where they had, it was all paper, all of his
All
cuttings.
of his cuttings. Yeah.
And they were, just amazing.
If you read his biography, he says that throughout his artistic career, he was looking for the synthesis of line and color, and he found it in the paper cutting. So he had a great time with the cuttings. But the shears were huge.
Yeah.
But the history of paper cutting is everywhere, and now, I mean, it started out really as a folk art, and then went into illustrative book design and stuff, and now it's really a fine art, and it's taught in all art schools now.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So there's a lot of, if you Google paper cutting or Scherenschnitte or Vichinanki, you can spend days on the internet looking at images and people who do it. So it's really come back.
Yeah, that's great.
It's
And
great.
so you were in the forefront of all that.
Yeah, I
You
guess.
know, your mom's
Yep.
handing you that scissor
Yep.
and a piece of paper opened a whole new
Absolutely.
vista for you.
Right.
And I'm also
most
intrigued
grateful.
with the newer pieces
Oh, the
that you're doing now with
The new pieces, I started doing
color.
some of the color work,
Yeah.
and this was one I did for a
So
calendar.
beautiful.
So it took me a long time to try the color because it's a whole different thought process, and I didn't know anything about color. And the colored work ends up being more spontaneous.
Let's see that one again.
And with the ones that are one piece, you sort of know what you're going to end up with.
So those are individual pieces of paper.
Yes, yeah, all layered. And part of it's ripped and part of it's cut.
Oh, really?
So that's where you
so
get
the
the
leaves
edges, yep.
are ripped.
Right.
Ah, beautiful. And again, it has that sort of three-dimensional effect because you are layering
Right.
the
Right.
paper, and some of it isn't totally glued
No,
down.
I don't like to glue it flat so
Right.
that it does lift, so you can see that it's cut
Right.
paper. There are some paper cutters that use like a wallpaper paste and glue it tight down, but it looks like a print.
I love this effect because it does give you that three-dimensional.
Yeah, and you get a shadow.
Even
you
under
get
the
a
glass,
sense.
you get the
Right,
sense that
right. You
it's
get
kind
a
of
shadow.
floating there, which is beautiful.
So I do more of the color now for calendar and note cards and that kind of thing, but 90% of what I do is the custom work.
So these are your tools?
Yes, these are similar to what I started with. These are called iris scissors. Can you see them? They're
look
like embroidery scissors, which is what I started on. And I used them for the first 15 years. And then one summer it was so humid, the paper absorbed all the water from the air, and it wouldn't cut the paper, it just kind of squished it. So then I started using the scalpel. And now I use both, depending on the design and the intricacy. And then these scissors are Joyce Chen kitchen scissors. And
really?
these are great for the colored paper. The little scissors aren't strong enough to cut the colored paper, so I'll use these for the colored ones.
And when
So-
you're doing something like inside, you use the scalpel for that?
Now I would. Initially, I use scissors.
Oh, really?
It just takes longer.
Right. Yeah, I forgot this one, which I
Your-
love. This
your
is
market.
Grano's Market, which store that we had when I was growing up. There's a basket of vegetables and and the sign in the back. And this is the one that I gave to my wife, and again, it's a beautiful example of Martha's creativity because
Here, I'll hold it.
you can look at the, I don't think, yeah, there you go.
There.
So you can look at the oval. When I went to talk with Martha, I said, you know, Angela loves to quilt. So what she did was she created the whole design as a quilt. And so this is really a quilt. There's the needle and thread, and you can see all the thread that has been cut through the fabric. And then again, she created this, you know, all these wonderful designs representing my wife's, you know, there's my wife's initials, and again, the music. My wife was a fanatical mahjong player, so there's the mahjong tiles. And this is my wife's family. She's, you know, got 3 brothers. And again, she loved to cook. She was a great cook in the kitchen, and a great fan of the Yukon women. Loved books. She read books, you know, every single day. And, you know, there's our home with my clocks and my garden pots, and my 2 sons again, with the dinosaur and the duck, and the masks for the theater and the music. But what I love about it, again, is she captured all the things that were important to Angela, and she created it all as a quilt, which is what Angela would have done. She would have made a quilt, and so Martha made a paper quilt for her. And so yeah, we just love having it on the wall. So I just think it's wonderful that you were able to create, you know, a career out of something that started just
lucky.
Sort of as a happen chance occurrence. You know, your mother handing you a pair of scissors and say, keep busy and don't bother me.
Yeah, I have to make dinner. She kept saying for 4 months, you know, something good is going to come of this. And she was totally right.
You didn't realize that. She knew what she was talking about.
Right.
But what I think is also so important is that, you know, which is a representative of a true artist, is that you have continued to evolve and grow and learn. I mean, you know, hearing you describe your initial, you know, attempt at this with no training and no skill to speak of, but yeah, you were able to
you know,
develop that.
Anybody who spends a lot of time doing anything, you'll hopefully get good at it.
Well, that's
so
true,
but
you also have to be willing to challenge yourself.
Well,
you know, and sometimes we have a tendency to just kind of go so far and feel comfortable with where we are.
My customers challenge me.
So, but you're up to the challenge, which is, you know, so it's a credit to you
thank you.
know, I mean, sometimes, you know, we could say, oh, I'm not sure I could do that, but I don't think you ever say that.
I do say that, but then the customer says, oh, yes, you can.
But in reality, it's not true. So
then I work at it. So.
Well, I just think it's a wonderful thing to be able to have done everything that you've done and continue to do.
I love it.
Yeah. So before we close, let's talk about a little bit about something I know that's dear to your heart, which is the arts trail that takes place in the fall. So just in a few minutes, tell about that. Tell how it got started and what it is.
A group of us got together, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. A lot of us were working in private studios. I had an outlet at Bittersweet, but a lot of people were working out of their basements, out of their kitchens. And they needed an outlet, not just running around doing shows. That's a whole different ballgame. So we got together and we thought, wouldn't it be neat if people could come and see where we work and see what we do and how we do it, and give each of us an opportunity to sell our work. So the first year, I think there were 7 or 8 of us on the trail, and now there's close to 40 on the trail. And it's 1 weekend a year, and people can go from studio to studio in Branford, Guilford, and Madison, and see potters and painters and metalsmiths and fabric artists, and they're all art and crafts. And one of these years I'm not going to do it so that I get
So
to
you
go to
can
all the
go.
studios.
Do the tour.
But it's been really fun for everybody, and it's a nice group, and it's a nice opportunity for people to see, and particularly for kids to be able to see what can be done in the arts.
Yeah, and I think, again, you sometimes it's really difficult to put together the final product with the, how it all starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from my own experience, having walked the trail or driven the trail, numerous times, it's always, a revelation to see, where it all begins.
Right.
And as you say, some people just don't have elaborate studios or elaborate
No.
spaces. They manage to find some place in their garage or in their
Right.
basement
Right.
that they dedicate to their art.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that comes, these beautiful, works of art. And it's all the medium, which I enjoy too, because I collect pottery. And I have like 150 pots.
Oh, wow.
Many more than I should even have, but I keep buying them all the time. And for me, the pot represents the skill of the potter, the person who threw that piece of clay on the wheel or just created
It's really hard to do.
And it is. I tried it once.
Really hard.
I thought, oh, this will be easy, but it was not. It wasn't. And so I really appreciate, the skill and dedication that goes into that. And I think when you go on this tour of the artists' studios and you see where they work and how they create what they do, and sometimes you get to see things in process.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not always the finished product or how it looks when it's
you have
halfway
the
through,
you have the opportunity to talk to the person who's
Right.
making it and ask them questions and get to know them. The work has a different meaning if you know the person who made it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah. So it's a wonderful thing that, and I think Branford is fortunate to have that organized activity every fall, and people can buy stuff, right?
Right. We hope they do.
Yeah. I mean, I know that.
Yep.
So it's a good, especially coming before the holiday,
Right.
people, sometimes you can find something perfect to give someone.
And order things too.
Yeah,
If you want
right.
something personal or specific, you can always
Right.
order something.
So, once again, Martha is just a wonderful example of how the people who create art have a journey that they've traveled. And, nobody wakes up one morning and says, oh, I'm an artist. And, in Martha's case, we have heard how, this all started and how it evolved and how she has grown and developed her skill. And in the process has been able to provide so many people. I know so many people who have a work of yours.
Branford's
And it
been
brings
very
such
good to me.
joy to the people who own them. And so that's
you.
what art is all about, and that's what we hope to be able to continue to do, to have more opportunities to appreciate art and to have art be a part of our lives day after day. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you next time on Branford Arts.